for me, I believe that we shouldn't be one-dimensional in our thinking when you go to university. Just because you do medicine doesn't mean you automatically become a doctor. University is where you go to acquire knowledge. Once you have that knowledge is when now you decide, I'll use this knowledge for ABCD or I'll use it for X, Y, and Z.
Hello and welcome to the Magnetica podcast. This is a podcast by two 20-something friends, Kim and Phil. We catch whatever life throws at us and try to make sense of it by sharing our thoughts and opinions. Magnetica will be full of great moments, so many oops, ifs, laughters, and tears of maneuvering life as young African women. If you want to have a great time and share in our experiment, tag along. Let's journey on together.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Magnetica podcast. And as usual, we have a guest who we are ready to learn from. I am personally ready to learn from. So Peter and I met in campus and it's been a long time since we graduated. So that's a very long time ago. We were both actually in an organization called Kenya Model of the United Nations, which is an organization that is meant to equip students, campus students or university students with knowledge about the United Nations. And you actually get to simulate some of their proceedings and stuff like that. So we were both leaders in our different universities, and that's how we got to meet. But I don't want, as usual, to say too much about my guests. I like it when they speak on behalf of themselves. So Peter, go right ahead and introduce yourself.
I've never done this before, but hi to everyone. This is Peter. As Purity has rightly said, we met many years ago. So not so many. You're still young, I believe. At Kenya Model United Nations, and I was doing law at MKU. So hence how I came to learn about Model UN and everything. But I never took the legal path, so I didn't go to Kenya School of Law. I took another path. I guess I found another love. It started with law, but then along the way, I guess I just deviated from law. Still love law. I think I'll do something in the legal field down the line, maybe. Some few years down the line, I don't know. But for now, what I do, I took up a different passion in tech. So I decided that we are going to start our own company called Connectify with a K. That was in 2018. So after graduating, I have two co-founders. Originally we used to be four, but yeah, things happened. So right now I have two co-founders. So we are three founders, myself, and then there is a gentleman by the name of Cliff and a lady by the name of Bianca. And so what is Connectify? If I may get into what we do and why did I decide to kind of venture into this industry having studied law. So Connectify, we are a solutions development company. So we do mobile and web platforms. So this ranges from basic websites all the way to, mobile applications and products, whatever product someone wants to come up with. So yeah, I'm not traditionally a programmer. Like I said, I started out in law, but I fell in love with the industry and decided, you know what, I think this is what I'm going to do for the majority of my life. Yes, I think that's what I'd say for now.
Okay, so what led you into law initially, anyways?
Wow. I think since I was in high school, I don't know why, I kind of just always wanted to do law. And then it was always, I think, the glamour of it all. Back in those days, we used to watch, there used to be this two series that used to come on TV about lawyers. I'm trying to remember one of them. There used to be one very famous. So we'd see these guys, and it's not Suits. I think Suits is quite recent. Suits came when I was still in law school, so I don't think Suits was inspiration. But there was another one, a very old one. And I would see these guys, debating and the glamour of life and everything. And I was like, you know what? I think I can do that. And I think I'd want to do that. But yeah, there was, I think when I was joining campus, there was the glamour of, law, medicine, and all these courses. So yeah, I kind of just went in saying, I want to be a lawyer one day and be regarded as one of those people who are regarded as advocates. In the legal profession, when you call someone a lawyer and they are an advocate, they kind of get offended. So let me use the correct term, advocate. Yeah, for me, it was the glamour, it was a nice career path. So I thought back in the day.
Very interesting. My brother just
Yeah.
became an advocate, so I'm like, if I call him a lawyer, he'll be offended. To us, there's no difference. It's like the same thing.
I'm not sure, but technically a lawyer is someone like me who's gone to law school, but they've not gone to Kenya School of Law. They've not been admitted to the bar, as it were. So if someone has been admitted, the official title usually is Advocate of the High Court of Kenya, if you want to be professional. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned that you fell in love with tech. So at what point when you were studying, what happened exactly that made you think, this is something I could do?
Yeah. So when I left campus, I had this guy. I think I did what most people did back in those days. I think it's something that is done, online writing. So I left campus and I met this guy. His name was Fred. So I started writing articles for Fred before I joined campus. And then we did for I think it was 2 years, did that job for 2 years. Then I joined campus in 2013. And then I think I lost contact with Fred. And 1 year later is when he called me and he was like, there's something I want to do and I'd like to discuss it with you. And I remember we met at this restaurant, somewhere, what is the name? It's called Baba's Oasis, and it's near Cobb offices, near railways. So that's where we used to meet most of the time. So I go to Baba's, I meet him, and he tells me what he's doing. And back then, he was working on a platform which they used to call Ndovu Card. So Ndovu Card was a way for people to pay for services by scanning like a barcode on your phone. So they put a barcode on the back of your phone, and then when you want to make a payment, I just scan that barcode. So that was kind of the idea of Ndovu Card. So of course, I knew nothing about technology. I knew nothing about even how websites are made, let alone barcodes. And here he is talking about barcodes and NFC, and I'm wondering, what in the world are you talking about? What is that? Is that what you want me to help you with? Because I have no idea what you are talking about. Yeah, but he told me that's what he was doing, and I think we started having meetings more often. I got to get into his world, the tech world that he was in, met his co-founder, met other very interesting people in the industry as well. And what I realized is, I remember one meeting we went to back in those early days. It was, I can't remember the name of the company, but it was in Westland, somewhere in Westland. So we walk into the boardroom, and this lady just, comes in and asks, so do you guys want anything? she's very casual, in her dress style, in her conversation. And me, I'm thinking maybe she's an employee and she's asking us if we need anything, so that she goes and calls the boss of this company. But then, after we are like, just a glass of water, and she comes back with 2 glasses of water, and then sits, pulls out a pen and a notebook, and I'm thinking, okay, what's happening? And just getting to meet these people who are very young and they are doing like big things, the projects they're telling you they're working on, you are like, wow, okay. It really fascinated me, and I started wanted to know what is it exactly is going on in this tech world, that you have all these people who are clearly very young and they are doing things that typically, maybe right now, you can believe that, but maybe back in a few years ago, it wasn't normal, I'd say. So I was very curious to know, like, what is it, from Fred, this lady I met, and all these other guys that I was meeting who are very young, what is it were they doing, that we were not doing, that myself was not doing. So I got involved more in the tech industry, got to meet more people. And as the years rolled on, I realized, what? I think I'm starting to develop a passion for this industry, for this career. And of course, at first, I didn't really know the technicalities. I just knew the business side of things. But when it comes to the technical elements of like the development, if it's like a mobile app, how it's developed, even if it's a website, that I didn't know. I just knew the business side, that there are people building, web platforms and they are earning millions. Like, that's what I knew. And that's what fascinated me at the first time, was like, you have these guys very young, they just come create something, and in a few years they are just, doing very big things. And then as I got into the industry, when we started the company and I got involved in the technical details, I think that's when now I got even more in love with now both the business side and the technical part of it. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, it was a combination of all those things, basically.
Yeah, it does. So did you end up working with them, or did you just then decide to start your own business, or how exactly did it happen?
Yes. So me and Fred and his co-founder were mentors, me and my co-founder, Cliff. And I wouldn't say that we worked with them. It's just that we were in their circles. So whenever they had a meeting, he will call me and we will go. So I got to get a lot of insights even into how some of this, and then what I realized right now maybe is a bit bigger, but back early in those early 2010, like 2013, 2014 years, the tech industry, especially consumer tech, because what we had initially was enterprise. A lot of people are building softwares like for schools and everything. That has always been there, but now this consumer side of like, I'm building an app for, I don't know, streaming movies, for example, was really early in Kenya. So I got into those circles and got to meet a lot of these guys now through Fred. When he had a meeting, we would go, and he will say, oh, this is the CEO of company XYZ, this is the CEO of company so and so. And then in 2017, there's this program by the government and this is when I initially decided, you know what, I think I have something here, I should turn into a business. In 2017, we decided we were going to host an innovation competition in Limuru. So since I knew Fred knew some people in the industry who would come in as quote unquote investors, and we do like a Shark Tank or Lions Den kind of thing. So I spoke with him and his co-founder, and they were like, "Hey, I want to do this, this, and this. There's a hub in Limuru by the government, and the Ministry of ICT wants to. They are going to fund everything, but I just need you guys to come and be on the panel that will judge these ideas." So as we were organizing that, there's this doctor who had from Limuru and came to the hub where I was. So the hub is I think nowadays they are called what? Ajira development something. They are everywhere in the country nowadays. I think nowadays they are more of Ajira digital program, but back in 2017 there was no clear-cut program. So Limuru had the first. So that's how and I'm from Limuru, that's how I ended up getting there. So this doctor comes and he's like, "I've had this idea and I'd like you to tell me how you can help me with it." So his idea, I'll share it. I don't know if he ever did it, implemented it, I don't know. So his idea as a doctor was that if there was a way that people could have just one hospital card. So if you go to Kenyatta, you go to Kejabi Hospital, you don't have to get a new card at Kejabi. They can just use a universal hospital card, if you will, for all hospitals. So you can just walk into any hospital and get served, even if you've never walked into that hospital before. So his idea was just to kind of centralize that whole industry. But they were stuck somewhere with his developers. So we sat down, and now using my experience, what I had learned through Fred and meeting all these people, I was able to know what challenge they were having. And I think we had a meeting of almost 1 hour. I told him, now this is what you need to do, this is what you need to tell the developer to do, these are the systems you need and everything. And he went, I was thinking to myself, so if that guy goes and implements whatever idea that was, I basically have given him the blueprint to do that. And I asked myself, are there people who do this? Are there people who like give blueprints for the tech industry? I didn't know if such a career existed, but apparently it does. There are people who do that. Like a company like Safaricom will say, we want to develop a new platform. They'll approach this guy and say, develop for us a blueprint of how it should be developed, what technology should be used, how it should work, all that. And this guy doesn't develop the app. They just write and just give the recommendations to Safaricom, and then, or any other company, they just implement. I came to realize that exists during the competition, because one of the guests we had, that's what he did for a living, like 8 to 5, that's what he did. So that was how I started now thinking about how can I use this information that I have that is not regularly available out here to build something, since there are already people doing it anyway. But yeah, that was the beginning. Initially, I had no interest in it. For me, it was just a passion I had. I was that guy, we could talk tech, what is trending for hours, but it was never like, I want to start a company, until that moment I had that meeting with this doctor, and I was like, wow, if I was to charge for that, how much would I charge? And would people even charge? So that's how I started now doing research and figuring out, is there something here that can be turned into a business?
Okay, I find it interesting that there are actually people called blueprint developers in tech.
Technology strategists. That's the official career term.
Wow,
I didn't know they
really?
existed, but apparently they do. Yeah.
That's the title, technology strategist. So do they have to know
Yes.
how to code? Because at that point when you were advising this doctor, did you know how to code?
No. I just know how like these products are supposed to work. So, for example, there's something we call in the industry called product market fit. So what that means is, ideally, if I'm building, let me use an example of some idea a young guy had shared with me back in those days. So what he wanted to build was a platform where I could go to an app and see the courses being offered by local colleges, and then choose which college I would want to join and do that whole process there, which I thought was interesting. I don't know if there's something like that out there, but I thought it was interesting. But the issue for him was he wanted to do it as a USSD. So for me, as knowing what I knew, I don't need to know how a USSD is developed. I just knew for the market he's targeting, because ideally he's targeting young guys, fresh from high school. They want to buy smartphones and they are interacting a lot with mobile apps. Using a USSD for that platform will be cumbersome, a lot of time, and it will be easier to do it as an app. So that is how I started. Like I could be able to see if you want if you want to build a platform for this demographic or for this market, it should be in this format and not this other form. It should be an app and not a website, or it should be a website or maybe not a USSD. So back then, of course, you just don't need to know how they are built. You just need to know what it needs to be done, basically.
That's very interesting. So, how have you ever been in a position where, or rather, do you talk directly to the developers while you're strategizing for them?
Yes. So initially, when I think one of the mistakes we made was we didn't quite understand the problem when we started. So we approached it from a consumer point of view. So back then, I just assumed that if I want a website developed, I just approach a developer, say this is what I want done, and they figure the rest out. So, and that's how a lot of people approach these things. But as the years have rolled on and we've dealt with clients, and I've even engaged with a lot of developers, both developers and business people, I've realized something. The problem in the industry is not a quality issue. It's an issue of a disconnect. So what business managers want and what developers are able to implement are two different things. Like the language they use are very, very different. So you find there's a very big disconnect that most people they even don't want to hear the term like I'm a developer. Like they hear and they get a headache because they've worked with so many of them, not realizing is there was a disconnect. So what they are telling the developer, to the developer is something very different to what they understand. So, and that is like the problem. Like for us, we really focused on solving. Like even today, we've dealt with clients who are like, okay, I've dealt with developers before, but the experience I've had is very different. Like I don't know. Right now, what I do is a client will come and say, this is what we want to build. Now it's my job to figure out from a developer point of view, what will that entail? In terms of timelines, in terms of complications and everything, what will that entail? And then I'm able now to discuss with the team and say, this is what the client wants to build from now from a developer point of view. So we kind of bridge that gap between the business person and the developer. But of course, from the developer side, that is internal. Like the client, when a client comes, them they just know Connectify is going to develop my thing. How they're going to do it, I don't know. For me, it's understanding what, and then sometimes a client will, especially nowadays when some of these big companies have really simplified things, most people like they will use something like Facebook or WhatsApp, and it's so easy to use, and they'll just assume because it's easy to use, it's also easy to implement. And that's usually another source of conflict. So someone will come and say, I want my website to have a commenting system like the one of Facebook. And he's just assuming that Facebook's commenting system is just something that is there, that is something easy to implement, not realizing that that's a whole system. So what ends up happening is if we engage a developer, the developer will just say, okay, fine, I'll do that. But they really won't explain what the client is asking ideally. So for us, we come in and actually explain. So you want this, okay, this is what that is. In the tech world, you can speak of something that you think is easy, but behind the scenes, what is powering it is very, very different from your understanding. That is like the main challenge that for us we saw and decided, you know what, using our background, me as a lawyer, my co-founder he did communications, and then we have our CTO, and then we have our other co-founder whose job is very difficult to explain, but her official title is that she's a DevOps. Uh, Please don't ask me what that is. I'll have a very hard time explaining what that is. But again, that's another career path that exists, but very few people know about. But yeah, it's there. We come from that background of when a client comes, you're not looking at their project from a developer point of view. You're looking at from a business point of view and also from a consumer point of view.
It's so funny. It's almost like your job is being a translator. You're being paid to be a translator. It's so interesting. I cannot. I'm trying to wrap you've told me this before, but today it's hitting different. It's like I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that you have created a company out of a language barrier between business people and developers.
It's a big issue.
And it's true. Now that you say it, I see it. Because usually it's the business person says one thing, the tech people do something else. And then they say, no, that's not what we wanted. And then the tech people make changes that are usually not the best changes. And then eventually they're kicked out of the project. And then you get other tech people and you have the same problem.
Yeah, the problem is not the tech people.
So let me ask, and this is I'm asking you to like give away your trade secrets a bit. So if business people were to communicate effectively with developers, what would they need to do?
I don't think the issue is. I think the issue is on both sides. So number one, most of us are really like, when you come to the tech industry, there are a lot of service providers. That's number one. And some of these service providers, sometimes how they charge is very technical. So even understanding, for example, I'm using this service or we use this service, you might be paying, for example, let's say 7,000 per month, but you as a business owner, you really don't understand what you're paying 7,000 for per month. You just know every month you pay something. And I'll give you a very good example. Google Maps. So Google Maps charges, if you integrate your website with Google Maps, they charge using something API calls. So they'll say, you get $200 free for every 1,000 API calls. Now, as a business person, you have no idea what that means. Like, is it per month? Does that mean per month, per day? What is that? So you have to understand what is an API call, first of all. You see, and that means you now have to stop what you are doing in your business and start researching what is an API. Okay, what is an API call? So that now you know when Google tells you that they are giving you $200 for 1,000 API calls, you know, what does this mean? Not many business people have that time to sit down and figure these things. I think in terms of communication, it's not really from the business person might not be the big issue here, because for them it's understandable. They might not, there's something when you go to your doctor that they might tell you that you'll need them to explain to you what does that mean exactly. you could do research, but it will take you probably weeks and weeks for you to really understand what that thing they're talking about is exactly. And it's the same thing in tech. So for me, I think the issue has been how we develop programmers and developers. I think that's where the issue is not with the business people. Yeah, so how developers are taught in our schools, in these boot camps we go to, and there's someone who gave a very interesting analogy, a friend of mine, and she said that whenever you hear an event for developers, is always this new language, this new technology. So it's like they're always closed off in their own world. And there's this world out here that all of us live in, and they have their own world, where they go to learn new technologies, new this, new that, new this. So now most of us out here, we really don't have access to that world. And for them, they also are not exposed to this other world that the regular person is living in. And for me, I was like, yeah, that's a big issue. So I wouldn't say it's a business person point of view, it's just how we train and build developers that has been a challenge.
Very, very, very interesting. I would never have thought I'd be having this conversation on Magnetica, but I love it. So for developers out there, please learn how to communicate what you do so that it makes sense and so that everyone is basically satisfied, so that I don't feel cheated when you charge for something. And yeah, there's basically no misunderstanding because I've actually seen that play out. So it makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. So my next question would be, and I'm thinking that the sessions you had with Fred and the fact that you had a low background really set you up for that kind of understanding.
Yes.
Because you were coming in with your own non-tech background. So you had to interpret that tech in a way that you, as a non-tech, could understand.
Would understand, yes.
So it helps. Everything in life just falls into place perfectly.
Yeah.
So my question to you is for, this podcast is for young people. We're always transitioning. We grew up thinking that, you're going to be a doctor and then you're going to be a doctor for the rest of your life. And then you come out here, you start by being something else. You become a photographer. Then after being a photographer, you become a chemist. Then you become a podcaster, and so on and so forth. So what does it take to transition to a new career path? And for you specifically, tech, because you told we're going to get there, but you told me that you're actually coding now. You started not coding, now you're coding. So what does it take to make that transition?
I think we all have passions in us. And sometimes you might have a passion for something you don't know yet. Until you are exposed to it is when you know, yeah, I think I can do this. I think this is something I would love to do. So I think that's where I would say it starts from the transition. You have to be exposed to something that maybe you haven't been used to. And then I always say, when you go to university, this analogy of saying that I'm going to university to study law to become a lawyer doesn't really work nowadays. Or that is not how you should approach life, as it were. But more of university is somewhere I go to acquire knowledge. Simple as that. How I use that knowledge in life can be anyhow. It doesn't mean that I studied law, then I become a lawyer. For me, I believe that we shouldn't be one-dimensional in our thinking when you go to university. Just because you do medicine doesn't mean you automatically become a doctor. But that's how we've been brought up to think. But university is where you go to acquire knowledge, basically. And then once you have that knowledge is when now you decide, I'll use this knowledge for ABCD, or I use it for X, Y, and Z. Yeah. So for me, transition is just, what do you decide to use the knowledge that you've acquired?
It's not that you're dropping one thing and then choosing to do something else. It's like you're flowing with the knowledge that you already have and just using
Yes.
it in one field or in something else that you're curious about and just following your passions, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, I'm I'm sure I don't know. I should send this to a couple of employers so that they know that we can choose to transition and use this knowledge in another field, because that's part of the reason why people don't make the transitions that they really want to. Because
Yeah.
how will you explain to someone that you're a lawyer who's in tech and doesn't know how to code, but you understand, but you understand knowledge in tech and you want to be in the field?
Yeah.
So my other question, as I prepare to wrap this up, is what challenges have you faced so far in just moving from being a lawyer to being in tech and being in business?
One, we are young, so we don't always have the credibility that most people want. So you might meet a client and they're like, you guys really going to deliver, such things. Number two, I think the biggest challenge for us has been now communicating this. Most people just know that if I want a website, if I want an application built, give a developer and that's it. So now us coming in on board and saying, oh, but there's so much more that goes into it. Someone's like, is there? I don't think there is. I can just get my app developed and that's it. I don't really need to care. So that has been an issue sometimes, having that conversation. So it's not so easy to communicate quickly until you have a sit down with someone and you break down all those things that maybe you've done right now, and someone now gets to understand. It's not something you can package in a flyer, for example, and then send it to someone and they're like, oh, I understand what you guys are doing. Because again, this is not something that has been there. So yeah, I think for me that has been a challenge even right now, that we are still trying to figure out how do we communicate this quickly. Yeah.
That's very interesting. I feel like that challenge will persist for a while because I'm thinking about myself. If I was a business person and you come and I, because I have no technical background, I don't understand what goes into it. I don't understand why you want to take more time to to make me understand what goes into it. I just want it done. And
Yes.
I feel like people like you get clients after, either after they have been referred by other clients or after they have really tried other developers and now they're tired and they want better.
Actually, that's a common theme for most of our clients.
Exactly, because they don't get it. So after they have tried everything possible, they're like, okay, now let me go to a Kinapita. Those ones
Yeah.
will probably turn things around, and they're almost giving up. They're now like, now I'm on my knees, help. Then they'll have the
Yes.
patience to listen. So I feel
Yes.
like the problem will persist a bit more, and then maybe in a few more years you'll have it easier.
Yeah. Probably. Hopeful. Hope so.
Yeah, and speaking of Limuru, which you mentioned, what else is happening in Limuru? We're always talking about Nairobi. but nothing outside of okay, there's a lot going on outside of Nairobi. So we want to know what else is happening in Limuru.
I think Limuru has always been sort of like a cultural center. I don't know if most people know that. So I wouldn't say like in the tech world that Limuru is, the next place, but it has a lot of hidden gems that you can come to and find, and you're like, oh, I did not know a place like this existed. Yeah, I think that's what for me, as someone who's lived in Limuru for quite a while, that's what I would say, that especially like for people in Nairobi, I think they kind of think when you come from Nairobi, you go to, I think, Kikuyu, Kino, from Kino to Kikuyu, and then now from Kikuyu all the way to Naivasha. They kind of just assume nothing goes on there. They have no idea what goes on there. It's just Kikuyu then all the way to Naivasha. So it's 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 a place that has a lot of, and I think there are a lot of these places coming up. I think I mentioned to you some time back about this place called Toria Mobi by the singer Kwame, which is us right here in Limuru. So there are a lot of like those places. Because I think Limuru has some sort of historical and cultural significance. I don't know, but there is a lot of that in Limuru. There are a lot of those two places in Limuru that you can just go and be amazed at how beautiful Kenya is. Yeah, I don't know if that qualifies.
Yeah, so there's Toria Mobi. And then
Yeah.
name two more that people can work with.
Yeah. So the thing with Limuru, and I feel like most places like Limuru, so from Limuru all the way to now, I think the place that most people don't know about, at least Limuru, I know there's some people, Lari. Lari is the place that I think most people don't even know about. Is some of these places are not structured, like they don't even have a name. And unless you have someone that knows that place really well and take you, because like in Limuru, there is also a place that people go to called the in Kikuyu it's called Kahiga Kaguea, which in English translates to the stone of fear. And it's this big stone that somehow is held in place by a very tiny stone. So that's why I think it got its name, because it can be scary standing on top of that rock, knowing that it's held together by a very, very tiny rock at the bottom. But it's not like it's a place people just go for free, you see, and so there's a lot of that. And even in Lari, there is also the Lari Forest, which I think nowadays a few more people know about it because of Kirita Forest and everything. But it's actually very, very big. I think Lari Forest is one of the biggest in Kenya. It's huge. So that's also a place that people can go and just see how people used to live back in the day. Yeah, I think Lari is one of those places that is just stuck in time. You can go there and see buildings that have been there since before colonial times. So yeah, so I think for Lari Forest is a nice place to Ria Mobi, and then if you really have no people in Limuru who live in Limuru, there's what are they called? The tea plantations. They are usually waterfalls, those sides. Uh, yeah, but like I said, it's not somewhere you walk in like you pay and do something. No, they're just there. A waterfall here, a waterfall there. They're just there. And so you just need someone who knows where they are.
Okay, they're just there waiting for us all to go and visit. I am coming, Peter, now that you have said that you need someone who knows where they are. So yeah, I'm coming.
Yeah.
So last question to you. I feel like this was a very chill conversation, but
Yeah.
very interesting at the same time. I've learned so much. I'm I'm feeling like I want to know more. about this, which means that, of course, I will know more because
Yeah.
I'll go digging. But my last
Yeah.
question to you for today is, how can you define your 20s? How can you define your 20s, basically?
Wow, that's a tough question to answer. How can I think in one word, identity. Yeah, identity. There's a lot there's a friend of mine who shared something with me. So this is a story I probably should not share live on a podcast, but uh, I'll try and be brief because I don't want to throw me there. So in 2017, I was in a relationship and it ended on 2017, December 25th. Apparently that's a very significant day. I don't know. But yeah. And I have this friend of mine who called me and, you've just been dumped, you don't want to see anyone, and they were insisting, I want to see you and see how you're doing. So we met. And we had a conversation. I told her what happened, and then she was like, Peter, you always have these big visions, and you want to do this, you want to do that, you want to do yada yada yada, but you never do it. Like you never do anything. And I was like, okay, is this the best time for tough love? Like this is the time you just drop that bombshell. But she was right. So that's why I said identity, because for me, I always knew there was a lot of things I always want to do. But as she mentioned, I never actually got to doing it. So me finding my way and figuring out, realizing that tech and Connectify is the vehicle that I'll use to achieve what I really want in life. That is the hallmark of my 20s. Because before I ventured into Connectify, I was all over the place. I was doing so many different things. I was so many different places. I was so many different titles, but there wasn't that one thing that I was doing. Yeah.
Very interesting, because as you were speaking, you were hesitant to share the story, but I was like, sounds familiar.
It's a long story.
Familiar. Yeah, and it resonates, to be honest, which is why I asked
Yeah.
you. So thank you so much for sharing. And that marks the end of this conversation. And I feel like I will bring you back. I don't know when, but I must, to just dig deeper into what you do, into how you communicate with businesses, into how you get your work done, etc. And whether or not people are starting to understand what you do. And like I said, it's going to take a bit more time, but you're doing it already. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on.
Very much welcome.
I think anytime I see a business person struggling with developers, I will just send them this podcast and tell them, fail to listen at your own risk.
But they always listen. Anyway. As long as you explain to them the importance, they'll listen.
In the end, after losing so much money and time and being
Yeah.
frustrated,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Peter. I'm looking forward to coming to Limuru as well.
You're very much welcome. We can do the next podcast live in Limuru.
Right? But I think I'll
Yeah.
come to Limuru sooner than that. So not when I'm 60.
Sure. Yeah, that's a long time away.
Okay. So thank you
Yeah.
again, and bye everyone.